As you all know, we have completed Swadeshi Indology 1 conference and we are at the stage of completion of the Swadeshi 2 Indology conference. Now, the papers that were presented in these two conferences were handled in a very professional way. We decided that there should be a double-blind procedure of the examination of the papers. That is, the writers of the papers will not know who is going to review those papers. And the reviewers do not exactly know who are the persons who have authored the papers. So this is done to ensure that there is a maintenance of a good quality and standard. Now, the one problem that we find with the publications of most Indian scholars is that they are not academically of a very high standard oftentimes. There is weaknesses in format, in presentation, in style, and there is no knowledge of maintaining a good bibliography or attention to diacritics and so on. There are very many illnesses of our scholars writing books, so not in the standard format. So we have tried to ensure that it is in no way falling short of international standards. The best of scholars that write in the West and the scholars that we present here should be of a comparable standard, and in no way should it be considered as inferior. In fact, I was hurt when I read the review by a foreign scholar of one of our writers, that's not of this group, some decades ago. This is an excellent book by an Indian author, and as a pleasant surprise, there are not many errors in the book. That's what he had written. So attention to detail and meticulousness are very important, and we have tried to ensure that the papers presented here are of an excellent standard. We chose Pollock as the theme of these two conferences, and that is because there is what is called in Sanskrit a pradhana malla nibarhana nyaya. If you have vanquished the most powerful of the enemies, you have as well vanquished most others who are inferior to him. So Rajiv Malhotra chose, he picks his battle very well. In Being Different and in Battle for Sanskrit, he describes why and how he chose Pollock as a worthy rival to be handled. And as a result, we have seen that one of the best scholars of the West and the one who is the most acclaimed, one who is politically quite powerful and influential, as to have influenced even the Indian government, and who sought to influence even our traditional mathas, has now been tackled here. And his ideas and his analysis has been shown to be flawy and faulty on multiple grounds. And another very great plus point of these two conferences is that a good majority of them are youngsters who have done this work of analyzing Pollock's works. And a good many of them, again, come from the fields of science and technology and have a good grounding in Sanskrit. So many of these, that you see, Manjushri, for example, or Meera or Narendran, all these come from the background of science or engineering and are well grounded in Sanskrit. So they can write in Sanskrit, they can speak in Sanskrit, so they have the authenticity. Now, a problem with a good many educated Indians is that they know how to read English. Many of them are good at English, and they don't have an idea of what an authentic translation, for example, of the Ramayana is, and whatever is easily available, they would look into it and go through that and be influenced by that. And sometimes they intuitively feel that something is wrong with what Pollock is saying. So, but they don't have the ability or the tools or the confidence to handle this and see where he is going wrong and why he is going wrong. So they can only be silent. So very passive receivers. So this should not happen. And if you want to criticize Pollock, it should be on solid grounds. And therefore, this solidity is what is insisted upon here. And this is what we have to do. Now, Rajiv Malhotra ji has pointed out how Indian scholars, if they need to be trained in Western modes of thinking, they go there or learn from them and get converted into their ideology. Now, this is something like the situation of a person who's trying to commit suicide. The policeman comes there and says, committing suicide is wrong. Then the fellow says, okay, just give me 1 minute. I'll tell you why I am committing suicide. The policeman listens to his story and then he says, okay, I too will commit suicide. So this is what's happening. So we must remember the tale of Kacha and Kumarila. They went into the opposite camp because they were well grounded in their own tradition. They could not get befooled by the ideology of other, however strong it was or however intelligent it was. So this grounding first in our own tradition is what is very important, and therefore it's very important that we scholars have a good and strong grounding in Sanskrit. See, for something like 5,000 years, India, the whole of India, because Sanskrit is the only pan-Indian language, the thinking of India has always been through Sanskrit. And if we do not know Sanskrit, then we can say nothing authentically about our tradition. So this becomes very important that our young scholars should have a sound ground of Sanskrit. And further, it's not sufficient. There have been many scholars of the Ramayana, and those who have even studied the commentators, and they are not able to handle the criticisms hurled at the Ramayana by the West. And that is because they have not tried to study how the other approaches. It's only when you know the other that you know yourself the better. And in fact, in Shastras like Ayurveda, it says, Ekam Shastram Adhiyanaha Shastrantam Naiva Gacchati. So if you study only one Shastra, you do not really know even that Shastra. And therefore, you must know many other things. So the knowledge of comparative religion and comparative philosophy, these are also important. And our students, our youngsters here, especially those who come from the background of science and technology, they have wonderful modern tools. So they can analyze things with a certain boldness which a mere traditional pundit cannot. And therefore, this is what is essential. And it's not sufficient even to keep reading the original of the Ramayana and so on. We must know how things are being handled. And for this, a most wonderful God-sent tool for us today is writings of Rajiv Malhotra. I would say that almost every one of us should do something like 1 hour per day reading of Rajiv Malhotra's various writings and looking at his videos, because he has spent some 25 years of tapas he has done for analyzing what is happening. See, I myself had been very much worried. So for the past 30 years or more, I have been very distressed by the writings of Wendy Doniger, of Leharty and the like, but I did not know how to tackle, how to handle. Now, no journal in India or abroad would dare accept an article written against these the so-called luminaries of the West, and therefore the global perspective of what the West has done to other cultures and what they are trying to do to our culture, this can be grasped most clearly and as relevant to most of us or every one of us in the writings of Rajiv Malhotra, and therefore that must be done. Now, what are our plans for the future? So after these two, already you have seen the books released. So 2 monographs have been released. So that is our achievement. And 1 proceedings has been released. So, and next we want to take up the writing, the papers presented in this conference also. And we are thinking of arranging them theme-wise and producing the volumes. So it may come to about 5 or 6 volumes, these 2 conferences put together and the monographs that are being presented. So up to 6 volumes of something like 250 pages each would be a befitting reply. So Pollock would never have dreamt that in a matter of 2 years, this much can be achieved, and his ideas so clearly analyzed and criticized. So in the short future, we are intending to hold 3 conferences, and I would suggest to every one of you to be serious about that. So it is important. In fact, just yesterday, Rajiv Malhotra ji was telling that even after you have finished the paper, keep reading Pollock, because there are different points that he makes out in different papers of his, and it's only one who has gone through the most of his papers that can get a clearer picture of what he is saying and why he is saying. So there's much to be read between the lines, and Rajiv Malhotra himself has done this work of reading between the lines and seeing the undercurrent of his ideas. And I think going this way, Swadeshi Indology Conference Series will make great achievements. In fact, Rajiv Malhotra has plans of taking some of the best in the presenters of the papers and holding a conference in the West. So bearding the lion in its own den, as they say, and showing them what they are. So thank you, Rajiv Malhotra ji, for inspiring this series of conferences. And this is, one thing is very clear, namely that all the participants have the clear feeling that it is a part of their tapas and the spirit of yajna. So to respect our heritage and salvage it from the clutches of the West. So it is the West that is conducting every conference on Hinduism. All the journals on Hinduism or Hindu philosophy are being held by the West. So if Hindus are also a part of it, it's only as long as they are subservient to them and simply accept their categories. So the things are now going to change, and a great change is to follow. Thank you, sir. Namaskar.
First of all, I thank Infinity Foundation for organizing this conference here at the IGNCA. And in fact, we had many questions and many doubts when we started discussing about this conference, because there is a difference between being an individual and an institution. And when anything becomes institutionalized, the scope becomes wider, and we have to think on a much larger platform. And that is why we thought of giving this conference the name of Global Perceptions of Indian Heritage, so that we can also look beyond something which is being looked into at present. But nonetheless, we all deeply appreciate the efforts done by Sri Rajiv Malhotra for fighting out this battle of Sanskrit, battle of Indianness, battle of Bharatiya ethos in the World Heritage position. IGNCA being a multicultural center, it's an example of having so many activities at one point of time. And it's very interesting today. Let me share a very interesting feature. On one side of this entire campus, there is an exhibition which depicts contribution of Jews in India. In the middle part of this campus, there is a festival going on, Jashn-e-Rekhta, which is, they are celebrating Urdu as a language. It is a 3 days festival. And on this side of this campus, we are celebrating the Indianness and the Sanskrit, battle for Sanskrit in India. So it's very interesting that three diverse things are being performed at one point of time in this campus. But that also gives me an idea and a thought to share with you. It's a very interesting thing. Just if you go and find out the event which is taking on for Urdu, that is Jashn-e-Rekhta, and the magnitude and the kind of fanfare it is going with the Urdu literature, Urdu poetry, definitely we would like to see a day when we would organize a similar kind of event for Sanskrit. And if that happens, our dream will come true. Whatever are our efforts to bring out Sanskrit on the forefront of this Indian ethos and Indian culture, it will only be possible if we make this as a mass movement and popularize it with the lowest categories of the society. Unless that happens, whatever we are fighting, whatever we are doing would not reach to its fullest potential. As far as IGNCA is concerned, on the inaugural day, I also explained you our efforts, whatever we are doing as a part of our Bharat Vidya Prayojana. We are also trying to build an army of scholars with the help of eminent persons like Sri Rajiv Malhotra ji, Professor Naga Swami ji, Dr. Ravindra Rao ji, who all are here. And we are trying to encourage the scholars, people who want to study the Indian ethos, the Indian culture, Indian traditions from Indian perspective. And our effort is that the course of dialogue should change. We should not look at the West as far as Bharat is concerned. They should look at Bharat whenever they want to talk about Bharat, speak about Bharat, think about Bharat, discuss about Bharat. If the barometer, if the yardsticks is available with them, our purpose is not fulfilled. We want that the barometer, the yardsticks should come to Bharat. Whosoever may be the scholar, whosoever may be the person who can take up the mantle, he is welcome. But he should be a Bharatiya first to think about Bharat. That is our course. And that is why I am insisting upon Bharat again and again, because the entire philosophy of the discourse has been changed when we started calling Bharat as India. So once Bharat became India, the entire thing went to their coordinating, and now they have decided about our future. They have decided about our philosophy, our ideology, our ethos. So unless we do that, unless we really very strongly work for that, our purpose would not be served. And I'm very happy to see many young faces here really passionate about working in this field, which is a welcome thing. I request you all to be a part of IGNCA, as it is Infinity Foundation is collaborating with IGNCA in many activities, and support us and help us out wherever you are. You are able to support us and help us out, and also try to bring more and more such scholars in this ambit, so that our gathering becomes larger and larger. And a day will come where the entire campus would become a place, a hub for organizing such kind of an event. Thank you very much.
I want to say a few things reflect on the conference and where we are going in the future. But first of all, I want to thank a number of people. This Infinity Foundation is less than a year old, and this came about largely due to the leadership of Vijaya Vishwanathan. I want to recognize a huge amount of energy, dynamism, vision, working on so many things at the same time, and just quite an amazing performance very quickly. And I want to particularly thank for this event's success, logistics. I want to thank Shalini. Where is Shalini? And yeah, I think they deserve, because they have run around making things. I want to thank Shalini and Aditya because I really think we would not have had things functioning, and they've been running 24/7, getting this thing done, that thing done, all the logistics and coordination, really great work that they've done. And Ruchi, where is Ruchi? Ruchi and her volunteers. So many volunteers. Yeah. So just so you know, Ruchi manages our volunteers worldwide. So if I need, if I'm traveling somewhere and we need an event, we need a lot of volunteers. She calls up some people here, there. I don't even know how, but a lot of people show up. So that's it's a big movement she's helped us with, and of course Kannan and his wife Meera for leading this whole program. And the scholars who presented have been quite remarkable, and especially the ones who presented monographs. And we have a new category called the Infinity Foundation India Research Fellow. So we have a few of those research fellows. Can they please stand up, the ones who are the research fellows? So they are the ones we are nurturing, developing. We'll take them around, we'll teach them debate, arguing, and make them published authors and so on. And we'll have a few more being given that respect and honor and recognition. I want to thank IGNCA. Joshi-ji, Sachidanand Joshi-ji has been a great friend of ours. And Aap Sudhir Lal ji, Sudhir is a great friend of ours. From the very first meeting we had with Joshi ji, he's been encouraging us ideologically on our wavelength, great friend, helping us. And we are entrepreneurs, and he knows how to run the machinery, which is a complex machinery, so we have to work together. And this is going to be the beginning of a long-term journey together. So this is the first conference, and it sort of establishes how we do things, and we'll be better and better at it as time goes by. So I'm very, very grateful to that for him. And also Aravind Raoji, he's on our board of advisors of Infinity Foundation India. He's also a trustee of IGNCA, so he's a great bridge. I want to thank him for a lot of things that he did. And Professor Mani Dravid Shastri, who's not here, we saw his video. He made available his brilliant team of traditional scholars, and that whole group. Now, I want to, I've emphasized in my book, The Battle for Sanskrit, in my talks, in the first conference, and I want to emphasize again that the school of Neo-orientalism has a head, but we are not isolating one man and talking about him. We're talking about a whole school, which is now the most influential school in the West as far as the study of India is concerned. There are dead scholars, but their work is, while it's influential, it's easy to criticize a dead scholar because he's not going to come back and do anything to you. He's not going to threaten your career and stop funding your foreign trips and things like that. But living scholars, a whole school of them, cabal of them, who are very powerful, not easy to criticize, and they are the more important people because they're having so much influence. Just this morning when Dr. Lakesh Chandra was here, he said, "Why are you making Pollock a god?" So I said, well, maybe do you know that Shingeri was appointing him as the god, or the ambassador at least? He said, no. I said, okay, then you have to know that. And do you know that Narayan Murthy has appointed him as editor-in-chief to translate 500 volumes? That's 10 times what Max Miller did. And did you know that? And he said, oh, okay. Then I said, do you know that the government of India gave him Padma Shri? He said, oh, really? And I said, in the US, the NRIs got together, some very rich people, because they wanted access to the power structure, and they thought that by honoring him, he'll open some doors. They gave him the Friend of India Award for a couple of years ago. And in this big PR that was put up in all these newspapers, 4-page, 8-page center spreads about him, the title was The Last Pandit. And there was Sheldon Pollock with the dhoti and tilak and nice and all that. He's the last Pandit. The whole thing was written about how the Sanskrit is dead, Pandits are gone, but there is one Pandit left. Now he can help us out and he can save us. So I said, now he is the god for the Jaipur Literary Festival. So we're bringing him down. It's not that we're creating a god. So he hadn't understood the significance, because many of our people are more familiar with past things, not current, where the battlefield is. To know where the Kurukshetra is today, you can't sort of rely on what was there in the 50s or 18th century or 19th century. All those are nice to know. But today, we talked about 5 waves of Western study of India after independence, and each of them echoed in India. The first wave was Marxism, and that created a CPI, who brought Marxism. It is not an Indian product. It was brought from overseas, and that generated a whole movement. And then this post-colonial studies started. It was made in USA by Edward Said, and there's a whole post-colonial movement here who just took this knowledge in. And then postmodernism, postmodernism. So like this, on and on, there's several, you can say feminism, Freudianism are all subsets of it, sub-branches of it. So this kind of analysis of different schools, if you do, then this one which we are taking on is the latest. So we are taking on the latest version of this whole Indian left and Hindu phobia and anti-national. This is where it is today. So we are taking on what is the most powerful force against our civilization as of now. And they are the ones who are active and getting deeper into the stuff. So rather than starting out by criticizing things that are not as powerful, we are doing where the action is. Even the subalternists are moving over to this new thing. So it's a very relevant thing that we are talking about. I want to say that the mission of Infinity Foundation has 2 parts. There is disruption and construction. Disruption is you break down and criticize and knock down the opponent. This conference is part of that. The Swadeshi Indology is a part of that. Then there is construction, where we want to create our narrative. That is a grand narrative project we have. There, we've already produced 14 volumes on the history of Indian science and technology. We did a lot of work on Indian models of psychology, cognitive science, and things of that sort. Now, that in the constructive area, we're not talking about other people, we're not criticizing anybody, we're just building our own history, our own story, our own science, our own knowledge systems. So constructing our knowledge systems is one thing, disrupting the other side is the other thing. So when you disrupt somebody, you have to name them to get impact, to be not ignored, you have to name them. And when you name them, you have to name them in a way that they'll recognize. So you can't just have a very generic critique without being specific about where the target is. Therefore, a conference that ICSSR is going to support us, help Infinity Foundation have in Washington, is going to be an analysis of South Asian studies in America. We agreed with that. The HRD minister was there, and Dr. Lakesh Chandra was there. Now the term South Asian studies was chosen because that's how the Americans call it. So if you call it something else, the people that we are engaging and encountering would not recognize it, or they would choose to look the other side. It is possible then for them and convenient for them to ignore. But if you're naming them, they can't ignore, and that's why we want to have them come, and so we can have this encounter. So to be non-ignorable, you have to name it the way the other side names it. This is why we have to call it Swadeshi Indology, because we want the Indologists to know we're talking about them. That's why we have to do it. But on the other side, when we are doing constructive work, we can call it Sanskriti, we can call it our Bharati Sanskriti, we can call it how we want to develop, because it's our knowledge system, it's not about breaking down. So the two have to go hand in hand. The pulling the weeds and planting the roses to make a garden have to go hand in hand. If you just plant the flowers but don't pull out the weeds, the flowers will also die. So you have to do the disruption and the construction both. Now, the publications we talked about, this whole Neo-orientalism school, Conference 1 and Conference 2, is going to produce a total of 7-8 volumes. And this has never been done. Our people have not taken on a particular school of thought in the world that is affecting us and done a focused piece of work of such magnitude and such depth that it becomes an important reference point in helping neutralize or dilute the effect of that school of thought. Because leaving it alone, it was just getting worse all the time. I also, I want to say that my comments on the papers, I felt that the papers were excellent overall, much better than the first conference. And I want to congratulate the authors. I do want to mention that you cannot respond without a very detailed Purva Paksha. So I found that the best papers were those that did the closest and most detailed reading of the target, the Purva Pakshan. The monographs clearly did that. I think Meg's paper, many other papers, they really did a detailed analysis of what the other side is saying. You see, people who haven't done that, you can tell that it is like jugaad. They're just sort of making it up. And then they'll either substitute with emotion, which is not a good idea, or they will make their criticism very generic about, oh, those guys are bad and all. We are not interested in that. We have to take a particular scholar, particular text, particular interpretation and give a response to that. So unless we've done very good Purva Paksha, the project can't happen. Now, the Purva Paksha, many people did very good Purva Paksha of a particular school, like particular text like Rasa, and they responded to the Rasa. Or somebody done Ramayana and they responded to the Ramayana. My plea to you is that you should diversify beyond the particular panel that you were on. If you were on Rasa, try to read up on the other things because it will help you on the Rasa also. I had to work very hard just to decipher and decode what exactly these people are writing and be able to make it simple for you in one book so that in each one chapter you can read about an overview of Ramayana, another chapter about Shastra and all that stuff, desacralization, so kind of dividing up all of the works, hundreds of papers and books into neat and simple categories, it takes a lot of effort. So I would like you to do that. Go back and read the Battle for Sanskrit again, and also read each other's papers, because then your own paper will become better. This is my view. Future, and then I will close. We want to, we're thinking of a conference in this year on taking back Tamil Nadu from the jaws of Dravidianism. And we'll bring in many, Nagaswamiji, great archaeologist, has a lot of data, many other people have. We would like to at some point do a conference on some other major schools of Indology, whether it is the Subaltern School by Romila Thapar, whether it is the Wendy Doniger School, and so on. There's a long list of targets. We want to go after those that are current. So then, we are also thinking of an Agama conference, because Agamas are not adequately studied and they are the backbone of Hinduism. So we need to do that. Arthashastra. This is one of our advisory members is Vaidyanathan, Professor Vaidyanathan, and so we are thinking of a conference on traditional Indian Vedic economic and political theory, and he's agreed to take the lead and develop a concept paper on that. And then the implications on national security. The book Breaking India and many other things we are doing. We are going to work with some people in the security area, both army and police and national security type people, and develop some programs that would concern. And also Vedic environmentalism. That's another topic of interest. So these are some of the topics. We do not have dates and we do not have a sequence and exact, but we're working on it. We would like, we've assigned the responsibility to different people to propose little concept papers, and then we'll have a call for papers, and committees, organizing committees, and that's how we will generate. I want to mention in closing that the goal of all this is to build a home team, and we set a target of 108 good scholars, good intellectual Kshatriyas we want to create. We already have 15, 20 pretty good ones. We want to nurture them and bring in more. It's a two-way street. We would like to be loyal and build that young person's career, not just, okay, come give a paper, thank you, you had your chai and gone, and we write you a... But it's, and then, maybe we'll meet you 5 years later somewhere, next conference has nothing to do with you. It's not that. We want continuity over time. And the event is not where the research is being done. The event is where you're presenting the research, but what we are sponsoring and funding and mentoring is before the conference, months before, a year before, senior people mentor junior people. So we select a topic, select the scholars, give them some, continuity, incentive, keep in touch with them and nurture them. And of course, there are those who are very independent and we just tell them this is the call for papers and they write the paper on their own. That of course is welcome. But we want to also be in the field of nurturing target scholars who we think are very high potential. And in return for that, all that investment and taking them into publications, making them authors and taking them internationally, we expect loyalty. So we want you to be part of a family and feel that you're part of constructing a school of thought. Like there is Marxism, there's post-colonial school of thought, there's subaltern school of thought, and so on. There's Neo-oriental school of thought. Hindus haven't created a school of thought in the past century. I mean, there is no prevailing Vivekananda school of thought, but there should have been, because after the person gone, everything scatters. Or a Sri Aurobindo school of thought. I mean, Deen Dayal Upadhyaya started something great, but there is no school of thought which is continuing that work. It is not just glorifying him, but actually continuing that thinking. There is no Gandhian school of thought. So I mean, it's sad that we have great people who start something, but then it dissipates because people are not able to hold together as a team and follow and continue a line of thinking for a whole generation. So we want to actually create a school of thought which will tackle many problems. This first one of Neo-orientalism is just one example, but we'll tackle many, many problems. So I want to close with that. I forgot to thank the camera crew and the photographers. Just want to add that we really appreciate. I want you to know The most, in many of my talks, I say the most important person present is the video guy, because this is actually a set at which we are shooting a film, basically. And sorry to say, you guys are a very tiny part of the audience that's going to watch all this, because we have now been successful in turning our events into online videos, and some of them are seen by lakhs of people. Uh, in the last 2-3 months, I've had online videos we put up which have had as many as 500,000 views, 300,000 views, many of them. I have no doubt that some of the lectures here will enjoy large viewership. It's enough to fill, many viewers is enough to fill the largest cricket stadium in India. So that when we are talking, you're talking to that group, you have to imagine. So the video people are exceedingly important. And we are, Infinity Foundation has invested recently in a very state-of-the-art, very high-class studio where we're going to turn all this into really nice stuff, and all of you will become movie stars. Thank you.
Distinguished delegates, I'm very happy to be here to speak to you on my views about the Indology conference that Rajiv Malhotra is having in New Delhi. I was supposed to come but could not because of various reasons, so I seek your pardon and apologies for not being there. What Rajiv Malhotra is doing is very important for our country and for our civilization. India is a very old civilization, and possibly the only civilization in the world which has accepted the right of the individual to question authority, and any authority at that. Being a very polymorphic or a polytheistic civilization, it means that we have multiple points of view, there is no dogma, and we have the right to question. And we accept multiple paths to the same destination. It's a civilization which asks the question about the reason for existence of the human race, the purpose of a life. And our civilization is based upon the individual's quest to realize herself, the individual quest to find answers which are very, very large, much beyond the mundane questions of existence. It's not about day-to-day life, but about the greater things of life. It's also a civilization which respected knowledge. It's a civilization where if the Rajguru were to come into the Raja's court, the Raja would come down from the throne, wash the feet of the Rajguru, and make him sit next to him on the throne. It's the only civilization in the world where knowledge and gurus were at the top of the totem pole, much above the warrior. In all other civilization, might was right, but it's not so in India, because we were based on the concept of dharma. Everybody has to preserve dharma, and everybody has to make sure the dharma is prevalent across society. And this, right from the top to the bottom, was the concept on which our civilization was based. So the philosophy behind our civilization has been enormously rich in many, many facets. It's almost a self-contained core which seeks to expand from time to time based upon the questions that are raised and the questions that are sought to be answered. Nachiketa's dialogue with Yama in the Katha Upanishad is an outstanding example of a young lad questioning the god of death himself and impressing him with his scholarship. Shankaracharya's dialogue with Mandala Mitra is another instance where disputes were settled by dialogue and debates. Disputes were settled by answering philosophical questions which impact the whole of us. Now, having such an old civilization, having such a rich culture, what is our obligation towards our past? What is our obligation to our society? Our first obligation is to preserve what has been there and carry it forward so that our children can continue to enjoy this in all its richness. Preserve it in the particular context, preserve the dharma and the culture behind our civilization and our knowledge, and make sure our children also understand. And here many of us fail because we think is available, is a duty of somebody else to preserve, and we don't make efforts. And we don't respect people in our society at this point of time who are not Western, the so-called Western attitude that's come in. And our children too are losing the ability to speak our languages, and the connection between what is there as knowledge and the language required to decipher that is coming down in a very significant manner. Second, we have an obligation to make sure that scholars and others who make sure that this civilizational legacy is continued, are honored, and well taken care of. We must promote scholarship across the whole of this country. We must respect scholars who are people who preserve our culture and who preserve everything else. And that, I think, is extremely important. And here is where we are failing too. Because of our inability to preserve this, to invest in our civilization, we are in danger of having our discourse and the future of a civilization determined by scholars who don't come from a culture residing in overseas countries, and particularly scholars who are wedded to a particular leftist ideology which is at variance with what our culture is all about. And I think we need to invest and create scholars within, and for that we have to support what Rajiv Malhotra is doing. The third important thing that is required for us is to make sure that we own our civilizational discourse and our narrative. The narrative is being taken away. The narrative is being taken away by a leftist school which derives everything that our civilization stands for, derives the Hindu Dharma in a very different way, calling us communal, abusing us all the time, derives us in creating institutions which mock us and which do not look at our civilizational heritage. It is so shocking and surprising that where every developed country has departments to study its own civilization, in our Indian universities, the government is just not allowing departments to study Indian civilization, Department of Sanskrit, the Hindu religion, and comparative religious studies, because they believe it goes against the secular ethos of the state, which is a very stupid argument, because the secular ethos very clearly says that the government should not dabble in religion and in the freedom of religion, but it does not say the government, as custodians of public money, should not invest in academic research on our own civilization. And that's why the quality of academic research, the quantum of academic research has come down. A new generation of scholars have come up who are being schooled in Western schools, who are taken over the narrative, and who are coming back here and dictating to all of us without much knowledge of Sanskrit, without having studied the old texts, without having engaged with the great masters, and telling us what our ancient civilization is all about. They deride us, they write nasty pieces, especially the piece that Ananya Vajpayee wrote in the Hindu, deriding the Sanskrit scholars of Varanasi for preserving the culture, and make bad accusations. And in our schooling system, our school books have been taken over by the left for many years, ever since Nurul Hasan came, and they have created a particular narrative which makes it very difficult for young people to say they belong to the Indian civilizational heritage, almost making them look down upon the heritage. And that is a very big problem that you have. We have another problem with government and governance. For very many years, the left has ruled this country, and especially the Congress party has created a narrative based upon Jawaharlal Nehru's view of the world, which says very clearly that India's spirituality and India's civilizational ethos is something that need not be encouraged. And Nehru seems to have changed after independence. Gandhiji was a man of the masses. Gandhiji is a man steeped in Indian culture and Indian civilization. Gandhiji believed in the innate spirituality of the Indian, whereas Nehru, being a brown sahib, was a very different makeup. Even though he wrote a glowing narrative in the discovery of India, but later on, after independence, he sought to make sure that civilizational studies and other studies were overtaken by science and technology. We need science and technology, but we must never forget our past and our rich civilizational ethos, because that is what makes us what we are. We cannot become widgets, we cannot become robots, we cannot become inanimate objects steeped in the technological progress of the West, but we have to be Indians who believe in the concept of dharma, who believe in the future of society, because our civilization ethos is sustainable. Our civilization ethos is not based upon conquest of nature like Western civilization is, not based upon individual aggrandizement like Western civilization is. It is not based upon making sure that you become wealthy and rich as Western civilization is. It is based upon sustainability, is based upon respecting nature, is based upon living with nature, and it is based upon creating a life where the main purpose of life is not the accumulation of wealth, which is important, which is necessary, but realizing oneself, finding happiness, and ensuring that dharma pervades the land. Dharma is much greater as a concept than the rule of law, because dharma involves compassion. So if you look at all this, the government of the center and the state today deride us, for our civilization, do not invest, and we as a people have to come together to force them to invest, because the primary responsibility of the state is the preservation and development of culture too. The primary responsibility of the state is to preserve the idea of India, which is much bigger than the idea that these kind of leftist intellectuals have for all of us. So I would say that we have a very important matter to accomplish, and that can be done in many things. One, we must ask the government, which is a new government, to establish departments of comparative religion in at least 10 Indian public universities, fund them with chairs, and create a corpus so that it will go on. Two, we must make sure that we fund research in Indian civilization in many universities by spreading them all across the country, like we do for departments of comparative religion. And the third, we must have journals and other mechanisms where the matters about this can be published so that people come to know. And this conference is doing exactly that, revealing for the general public the rich civilization heritage of this country. The next thing we need to do is to make sure that we use the contemporary material, the continuing dialogue that we have, and the new researchers to feed into our textbooks, both into our school and into our colleges. We need to rewrite history, especially about ancient India, about medieval India, and about the conquest, the Islamic conquest that happened in this country and the brutality of such conquests, not to hate somebody, not to create ill will, but to understand what we have gone through and how in the midst of such adversity we have preserved our culture even now, and how so many people have struggled for hundreds of years to preserve our rich culture and our rich civilization at a cost to their own lives. Just like the Jewish people never forget the horrors of Holocaust, the Jewish people never forget their 2,000 years of wandering and have created their own country. And the Jewish people have preserved Hebrew, the Jewish people are preserving their old culture and ensuring it. There are some negative repercussions too. We must make sure that we preserve it and put it into our class, into our text. Yes, the state is secular. It does not mean that our children should not learn about civilization. If there are others who belong to different faiths who want to learn, they too should have similar opportunities. But everybody should learn about multiple religions in this country, multiple happenings in this country in the true form with the data based upon research rather than based upon a leftist interpretation of our history and everything else. And we must not wipe out the memories of what we have. The next point what we need to do is we must invest to preserve our ancient Gurukula system. The Gurukula system and the Academy of Greece were the two ancient educational systems which created a fantastic outburst of human creativity and human literature. And I think it's important to preserve that, especially the teaching of Sanskrit, especially the preservation of all the great manuscripts that we have all across the country, put it into the web so it's freely available, and the intonation and the passing on in an oral form of our Sanskrit scholars and all other scholars so they can be preserved and they can be studied before it's lost forever. The quantum of output and the quantum of knowledge retained is coming down, and that's very worrisome because in 20-30 years, the great masters die and young people don't take it up, things could be lost forever. And if we lose our past, what are we? We become empty shells, a people without any roots, people without any culture, looking up to other countries for culture when very great culture rather is here. The next thing which we would do is honor our scholars who study our Indian civilization and make them heroes. So people look up to them, people respect them, and people know that they are going to preserve a culture by coming to conferences, giving them awards, and talking about them and do it. And do it in a rigorous academic manner. It has to be rigorous, it cannot be academic. It cannot be that somebody says that there was stem cell research earlier and this happened and that happened. I don't think that's necessary, because let us go with the scientific rigor that our ancient seers had. They wrote all this based upon logic. They wrote all this based upon reasoning. They wrote all this based upon debate. And that debate and the reasoning is something that pervades all our civilization. And we also need to take other steps, have an advocacy where we go to people and opinion makers and decision makers and tell them about all this. Have many more conferences. And at the end of the day, work together to preserve this, to talk to the world and to tell them. Because as India becomes a larger economy, becomes a superpower, we need to have the idea of India. And the idea of India has to be rooted in the idea of India as a civilization. The idea of India is civilizational, The idea of India is cultural because we are, in a sense, a collection of 29 different countries. We are very different people. What do we have in the south with those people in Assam except our civilization, our culture, our religious traditions? We have different food, different forms of dress, and different everything. What do the people of Kerala have in common with the people of Gujarat? Or the people of Tamil Nadu have with the people of Himachal Pradesh? They are very, very different people, but we are united. We are together. We have common areas of interest, and this commonality has to be addressed. And lastly, we must preserve the freedom of thought, the freedom of speech, the freedom of debate, which is an enduring legacy of our forefathers. Our forefathers debated, they discussed, they never resorted to violence, they solved many complex issues to long years of dialogue, and I think that's important. One of my professors in Ninasam, in a conference in Ninasam near Sagar, was talking about the reason why we have multiple Ramayanas. He said the Ramayana is one of India's great epics. It's the way which shows how Dharma can be preserved and propagated. And he says there are multiple Ramayanas because every generation that is come on has reinterpreted the Ramayana in its own cultural ethos. So we can't be subject to one version of the Ramayana. We can't be subject to the Valmiki version of Ramayana alone. There are multiple things. And every generation has a duty to reinterpret the epic, answer the great questions that have been raised about dharma, about governance, about right and wrong, the treatment of women, the treatment of subjects, the duties of a king, and everything else in his own ethos and write his own Ramayana. And our children will write their own Ramayana. Everything will write. But the common theme of the Ramayana will remain. And these multiple Ramayanas will address the issues that challenges, the human dilemmas that we face, the great ideas that come in a different context, in a different area, in a different time. But the heart of it is our freedom to debate, our freedom to question, our freedom to decide, and our freedom to have our own way of life, which cannot be constrained. And no society in the world has this freedom inherent in the civilization. No society in the world. The monotheistic religions are based upon dogma. And some religions are so dogmatic that you cannot change a single word which comes in the Holy Scriptures at the pain of death. But these are not acceptable norms in our civilization. So this questioning attitude is what leads to greater creativity, and that has to be done. I want to end by thanking Rajiv Malhotra for holding this fantastic conference. All speed to him. For the last 20 plus years, he's been fighting the battle to get the narrative back from some malcontents in the West, who has taken it and are reinterpreting and trying to push it to their own scholars down to us and teaching us what our own ancient traditions are without understanding what it is, without the scholarship and the research. He's taken on this journey to write, to fight this intellectual battle, to take the narrative back. We have to create a narrative. We have to have many more conferences. We must honor our scholars because in that lies our future and our salvation. Thank you very much.
So let me quickly share my thoughts on how this goes about. I'd like to say that Foundation for Indian Civilization Studies is the brainchild of a bunch of people, right? Of course, Mohandas Pai was the key person there. Apart from Mohan, we have Abhay, Prahlad, Kiran, Murali, and Ravi Shankar. We all got together and we have been interacting with Rajiv, right? And of course, the whole idea is to be able to support this kind of thinking in a good way. And for, I think, almost all the book releases, except for the first, Mohandas Pai has been with Rajiv, okay? And we did both the Being Different as well as the Indra's Net was also done by him, and the Battle for Sanskrit. All three books have been released by Mohandas Pai in Bangalore. Okay. Now, I just want to take a few minutes of your time to just share some impressions, and I hope you will indulge me. I know the time for lunch is there, the boxes are waiting outside, but I need to do justice to FICS, right? I am a person who believes in Swadharma. I am just doing my Swadharma. And I believe Rajiv ji is doing the Swadharma, and I think between us, we expect all of you to do your Swadharma. And what is the Swadharma here? That we need to protect, nurture, preserve, and sustain our dharma, right? Rajiv ji mentioned loyalty, and if you closely observe, it's something very, very interesting. remember that Delhi is a place known for so many good things, but here's something which you should also understand. Loyalty doesn't mean incompetence. Loyalty doesn't mean psychopathy. Loyalty doesn't mean creating a small echo chamber where the efforts to do this intellectual Kshatriya work goes on, but then it's stuck in that intellectual chamber, right? Loyalty means you need to know how to align the energies. Loyalty means get the best for what has been started. Loyalty means keeping up that parampara, right? And just so happens that I would say, like we had the traditional paramparas, here's one modern parampara, the Swadeshi Indology parampara. Am I right, Rajivji? Okay, so that is point one. Point two, which I wanted to share with you is, many of the sophisticated scholars of the West, and I am not a scholar in Indology at all, but then I do understand. I have some common sense and I can kind of make out what's happening. They use sophisticated terms like, South Asian studies, right? Pre-modern South Asian people. Did you know that this thing called pre-modern South Asian people is a metaphor for Aryan invasion theory? We don't know. There's a South Asian university just nearby somewhere here. Why couldn't it just be Indian university? The reason being very simply put, I think maybe, I don't know, the Pakistanis have been very, very hating this idea of India perhaps. They do not want to have this thing called Indian anywhere around. So any funding that goes, take the name out. South Asian is better. Like Rajivji say, we have to engage with them in their terms, but to be able to strengthen our foundations. Am I right? So pre-modern South Asian, that phrase immediately should trigger in you an endorsement of Aryan invasion theory, right? It's the other way around that a lot of evidence is coming out now, that we in India, along the Saraswati River, not even in the Indus River, along the Saraswati River have done so much for the good of mankind, for the sake of humanity, that it has spread around everywhere. That needs to be dug out. So it's not a reaction, it's not just response alone. Need to build up the foundations as well. That's the other effort that needs to be put along. That's something which was coming across in many of the sessions that I sat through. I would also like to share some thoughts on, the undercurrent of power. See, many times what I did notice is, you take what is written in the book and then you're off onto that syntactic and semantic level. But what is important is this, and I think this is something which we need to reinforce amongst ourselves. Sheldon Pollock and a lot of people like him have an underlying grand narrative, right? They don't explicitly state that. There are a lot of things about that grand narrative, the grand Western power narrative. They align their thinking to push that in whichever forefront they think is right. And the people who fund the projects do this Darwinian selection of what they think is important, the underlying Western power narrative. Okay. Now, because they get the funding, they come to India, they say, okay, here is this very interesting civilizational narrative, but then could that be a threat? It's never discussed as a threat. Okay, amongst here, we can talk that we have enemies and all that, but when you write a paper, you don't talk in terms of enemies. That's not really academic. That very fact that you use the word academic means that paper might be dismissed in their circles. We need to know how to do what is called as, in quotes, rigorous work, the way they think is rigor. But then we need to retain our roots as well, right? This power structure problem is something which we need to understand fully and thoroughly. And I kind of seen many people do not understand that part. So you're kind of stuck with the word and why the word has been used. Look, he is not being appropriate in using this word or that phrase. No, there's something behind. And that's why he's selective in using what he has. He has a thesis, he builds the support for the thesis and pushes it. And you can see in that paper on Death on Sanskrit, why does he have to call about BJP and Hindutva in something related to a language? That's the power agenda, right? And he is being very, very normal in his scheme of things. He is just one representative of it. We need to understand we have a bigger responsibility to build up that Indian identity, right? And this is all efforts in that direction. Understanding Indian identity is something which is very, very important, very, very deep, and we need to go real deep, really deep. We also were talking about, our Sheldon Pollock maps our thinking into Vico's thesis, and then from there he takes it to some other dimension and then shows how the whole thing is actually flawed, right? I'd also share with you that Vico is one such person. There's a guy called Ebola, like Ebola, right? Ebola. That tsunami is going to strike you, so you better Google up, find out who this Ebola is, find out what is he up to, what is he quoted for, and why we need to be careful. Okay? And then I'd like to share that we always say anything that we do, we have to do keeping the masses in mind, the subaltern masses. Dharma is all about caring for not just the masses, but the entire ecosystem. In fact, Dr. Joshi was mentioning, whatever we do such that it will go to the masses. It was always been with the masses. Masses had empowered the scholars to do seva on their behalf. So that needs to be brought out, right? We need to expand the horizons beyond Pollock, and that's exactly what Rajivji mentioned, right?
I want to thank Dr. T.S. Mohan, and Mohanji as I affectionately call him, for being a friend for many, many years. He sort of promoted my work and worked very hard in Bangalore area, and so he continues to do that as a part of his own Swadharma. And also, Mohandas Pai has become a very good friend. He not only launched these books, but he's bought sometimes hundreds of copies or thousands of copies quietly and just given them to every VIP who comes. In fact, he showed me, when I went there, his secretary showed me his whole closet is filled with these books, and whenever a guy comes, he says, read this, read this. So he's a kind of a dharma evangelist, you might say. And many years ago, he said, we should start funding you. I said, of course. So he said, we'll get a group of people together. So then one day he said, okay, now where's your India organization? We can fund it. So I said, I don't have an India organization. We did not have IFI at the time. So he said, what do you want me to do? How do I do it? So I said, you create an organization, you fund it, then they can help us out. So that's how this entity came about, and he got a few other people involved. And so now we are closely aligned. We are working together. And I see them as a sort of dedicated, committed angel investor for a long time in helping us. And I would just want to thank, FICS and their representative here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, moving right along, can I have Sri Joshi ji also sort of come forward? We have a very quick award ceremony for all the excellent work that scholars have done. And first and foremost, we want to honor Dr. Nagaswamy, who has done excellent work and has committed a lot of time to Swadeshi Indology and has committed to supporting us with scholarship and time. So we want to give him a Lifetime Achievement Award. So Rajiv. Okay, next we'd like to honor the scholars participating in the Sadas under the guidance of Brahmashri Mani Dravid Shastrigal. We'd like the traditional scholars to come to the stage. Vidwan K.S. Maheshwaran, Vidwan C. Hariharan, and Vidwan Saujanya Kumar. Yeah, and on behalf of Mani Dravid Shastrigal, we ask Sri Maheshwaran to take the award and the Sambhavana. Yeah. And Mani Dravid Shastrigal also. Yeah? Next, we'd like to honor Vidwan C. Hariharan. Next, we'd like to honor Vidwan Saujanya Kumar for his participation in the Sadas. And next, we'd like to honor our own Infinity Foundation fellow, Sri Sudarshan, who has helped put the entire Sadas together. Without him, none of this would have happened. And finally, I'd request Vidwan Maheshwaran to come up again. And we'd like to honor Mani Dravid Shastrigal, although he's not here. But Sri Maheshwaran can be honored on his behalf. Now we'll start the awards for the monographs. First, we'd like to honor Manjushri Hegde.
And this is presented to Manjushri Hegde for an outstanding monograph, which will become a book.
The next award is for Sri Narendran TM, who also presented a monograph. So, Sri Narendran.
This is presented to T.M. Narendran for an outstanding monograph. Yeah.
Now for the best papers. The first awardee is Sri K. Gopinath, whose paper was found to be excellent and gets an award of rupees 70,000 for this paper.
This is presented to K. Gopinath for an outstanding paper. Great job. Thank you. Congratulations.
Next, we ask Megh Kalyana Sundaram and Manognya Shastri, who wrote a joint paper, which has also won an FICS award.
It says, this is presented to Meg for an outstanding paper. Meg, congratulations. All right? So you're welcome to our team now.
Next,
And this is presented to Manognya Shastri for an outstanding paper.
the next prize of rupees 70,000 for an outstanding paper goes to Nilesh Oak, but Nilesh is in the US, and Dr. Kannan, we request Dr. Kannan to collect the award on his behalf.
So he keeps the money? That's pretty good. We'll go out for dinner.
Then, okay, the next prize goes to Dr. Srinivas Tilak.
So this is presented to Srinivas Tilak for an outstanding paper. I want to tell people that Srinivas and I have been on this journey for a couple of decades. He's never failed me. He's always been there. He's been a great friend and ally, done a huge amount of work for me. If you remember, we went to this Indiana University, if you remember that big fiasco. One day we'll tell you the story, what all happened. We had this big shot scholar, after hearing my presentation, he took out his shoe and banged it on the table, because it was like what Khrushchev did in the United Nations once, banging his shoe on the table. That became a very historic moment, and he was there to save me from his shoe. Right? You remember that? Yeah, okay.
The next award goes to Dr. Soumya Krishnapur. She's already left, but her husband Jayaraman will receive the award.
So this is presented to Soumya Krishnapur. Please congratulate her. And thank you.
The next award goes to Sri Shubhadeep Mukhopadhyaya.
So this is presented to Subodhdeep Mukhopadhyay for an outstanding paper. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
The last and final awardee is our own T.N. Sudarshan.
And this is presented to T.N. Sudarshan for an outstanding paper. Congratulations.
As a last part of the valediction, I invite Dr. Arvind Rao to give closing remarks on behalf of IGNCA and present his vote of thanks.
Dignitaries on the dais, respected scholars, it is my pleasure to give some remarks, but I realize that it is a very difficult task because the lunch boxes are waiting outside, and having waited for quite some time, I hope you may have the patience to wait for a few minutes. I am talking as a member of the IGNCA, a trustee of the IGNCA, and I am also an accidental entrant into the field of Sanskrit. Originally, I am not from Sanskrit field. Like most of the youngsters who are from the IT field, I am from a much more stranger land, that is from the police department. So somehow, by good fortune, I came into this. And there is a saying that is satam sadbhis sangaha kathamapi hi punyena bhavati. So something like that, I have done some punya. That is the reason why I am able to meet so many eminent people like this. And now I think that a time has come when the Indian scholarship has to talk in terms of scholarship before Rajiv Malhotra phenomena and scholarship after Rajiv Malhotra phenomena. It has come. So that is the reason. That is the reason why we have been saying that it is a very, very historic session. It is a historic session because it is marking a total departure. It has created so much of awareness. And so many youngsters, a very happy feature is so many youngsters are present here. And I interacted with a lot many youngsters and then asked them as to what brought them to this. So they said they have studied Rajiv Malhotra's books and then they have also heard his talks on the YouTube. So that is something, that means he has created it is such a miracle. It is such a miraculous thing that so many people are galvanized into this particular movement. So that is what we see. And then how did this happen? This is all because of his own, merely the force of personality. In fact, about me, if I want to say how I got attracted to him, when I retired sometime in the December of 2011, when I first read his book, that is the Breaking India, I was really stunned to see so many things which I did not know in my 34 years of police service. In fact, I felt slightly ashamed also that so many aspects which were told in his books were totally sidelined, totally not even talked about in hush-hush terms, but totally ignored. We were only talking about some Maoists, and then we were only talking about that Islamic fundamentalists, etc. But much greater danger about what was happening to so many, factors, so many divisive forces within the country, I was totally unaware of. And in fact, my first reaction was to discuss with our intelligence bureau people and what is called RA, and then give them a few books, and also gave some books to our governor, etc., to some such people, people who are the opinion makers and those who matter. But even today, I am surprised that this book has not reached all the IB officers. And then this is something which is, I feel that it is something very sad, that people are not even aware of Breaking India even today. Many people who are supposed to know this. So this is how I got attracted to Sri Rajiv Malhotra. And then, so what he is writing is not something like some sort of octogenarians, some nostalgia for something which is past, but it is something about our future. It is something about the integrity of the country. It is something about the internal security situation of the country. That is how I look at it. And as many people have pointed out, there should be further research on his books. What he has mentioned, it should not be left like that. We should not idolize. We need not. Of course, he has already become an idol, and there is no need to further idolize him. But then it is not enough if we just worship him. It is very, very necessary that we have to take a cue from his books and then do some further research. So that is what I feel. And what we have seen about this, Western scholars, that phenomena, is something not very new. They are only carrying out what some Francis Xavier did in the 15th, 16th century, in the early 16th century, and then, 16th century, sorry, and that has been continuing. And these people are coming in newer and newer forms, in more subtle and subtle forms. And the papers which were presented here by the people are really wonderful. That is one thing. And then of course, one comment is we only discussed one particular professor. But then you all realized, and then many people have also pointed out, that he is a small player in a larger game plan. Because it is not as though he is the only villain. He is only a part of a bigger game plan. And that bigger game plan is something to do with the security of the country. Because when there is a war, there are two words which are used. One is strategy and one is tactics. Strategy is at a higher level, where certain larger perspective is kept in mind. And tactics is where all the nitty-gritty details are worked out. And this gentleman, Mr. Pollock, comes in that tactics level and not at the strategy level. There are much higher levels. Of course, we have been sensitized about that. We need not, talk about it much. But then, as he himself suggested, we should not do this ad hominem criticism, and then we should only talk about what exactly is the point and how we can refute. There are several ways of improving our arguments. In fact, when I was listening to the traditional pundits, I also got some ideas. In fact, I will further discuss with them. There are several ways in which we can further improve upon. And here, of course, I want to make some suggestions. Of course, the time is over, but still, whatever occurred to my mind, I have just noted as some points only. That we are all, the young scholars, I hope they are also aware of what is called the soft power. Many of them must be aware of the soft power. If you are not aware of them, I am talking like an old man, kindly put up with me because I am taking advantage of my age. So if you are not already knowing this concept called soft power, kindly read that Soft Power by a person called Joseph Nye. And that man, incidentally, is a former intelligence officer. And I also request you to read another book called Faith in the Halls of Power, if you have not read it, Faith in the Halls of Power, by a sociologist called Michael Lindsay. He talks about how, say, religious groups have become very, very powerful in the US government, and not only in the government, but in various aspects of administration in the last 30 to 40 years. So that explains the reason why the American scholars who were not very unkind to us, say about 40 years ago, they are ruthless. They are on the killing, say, mode when it comes to Indian scholars, or rather our civilization. So that explains the reason. So this is, it means that, say, what we can call evangelism and scholarship, NGOs, they are all working in tandem, which has been initially explained by Rajiv ji in his first book, that is in his book Breaking India, and later elaborated. So this is faith in the halls of power, of course. That is one thing which I request you to note. And then what we can do is to sensitize more people. We are having some idea now about what exactly is the battle, what is the battlefield and all that. So we have to sensitize more people, particularly those in the academic field. So that is because why I am saying this word academic field is, you and I, we have no access. Many of you are not from the academic field. We don't have access to a university. Whereas this gentleman who is working in a university, he can be called to Harvard, he can go to any university. So we should have some access to universities. Maybe some of you can actually switch over and then join the universities also and continue this thing. I request you to kindly think about it, or maybe take further guidance from Rajiv ji, because he knows all the ropes and then what exactly is the structure. And then, of course, we can sensitize by various other means, by say like this Facebook, etc. And then, and one more idea which I got is, like they are writing about our history, why can't some people dedicate themselves to write about Western history very, very truthfully? Absolutely nothing wrong, absolutely truthfully. We have got so much of material about what happened in America, Native Americans, and then what happened to some Mayan civilization or Inca civilization, and then what about about the history of slavery and whatnot, and history of genocides history of genocides, etc. We have got so much of material, and there is much which can be researched. And our point of view, okay, we are not allowed to write our own history, but at least we can write Western history very, very truthfully. So I request you to think on this thing. And then we can also concentrate on the Southeast Asian nations. People like Dr. Nagaswamy have brought out, say, the links between, cultural links between India and Southeast Asia. And Southeast Asian studies, this is one thing which we can do for further consolidation, etc. And then there is a saying, if you want to make somebody has drawn a line, and if you want to make it short, you have to draw a bigger line. So what I mean is, if there is some adverse propaganda against us, we have to produce more material. We have to produce more positive material, and all the youngsters, and then whoever are the Sanskrit scholars, we should try to speak in as many forums as possible, in as many places as possible, and then we should try to write articles in much simpler way, because Upanishads, etc., they contain very great ideas, in fact, which are not known to even intellectuals. The so-called intellectuals whom we find in the universities, they have almost zero knowledge of our tradition. So that is a tragedy. So at least if we speak to them, if we write articles on such things, so at least some people will think, yeah, there is something about it before criticizing. And we also believe in one term called bringing people onto the mainstream. In police, we do that. Even Naxalites and all these hardcore criminals, we try to bring them onto the mainstream. I know that lot many people who call themselves as left-wing intellectuals, many of them have joined by just as a matter of fancy, because there is some little bit of romanticism about it. Like the civil liberties and human rights groups and Human Rights Watch, etc., etc., there is a little bit of romanticism about it. So people join there. But there is a core group, which is the hardcore group, who are really ideologically solid and then ideologically they are committed. But there are several other people who are not so ideologically well informed. They have just joined because it is a fashion. So many people we will be able to convert, or at least we will be able to soften them, say at least neutralize them. So that is one strategy which we can follow. Even with some hardcore people I have followed. For example, Kancha Elaya has been mentioned by Rajiv Malhotra ji in his book. I, along with one editor, I went to his house and then I spoke to him. He gave me tea and then spoke pleasantly. And thereafter, his tone has become slightly, say, mature, or rather at least softer towards this Hinduism. He has, of course, his hatred towards Brahmanism, etc., but then he slightly, he has, he has become, say, softer. So that is what I feel, that we have to try this aspect also. So that is one view. And another thing which we can do is, the books of Sri Malhotra ji, Sri Malhotra, we can summarize them in about 10 to 20 pages and then circulate widely. In fact, regarding Breaking India, I circulated a few thousand copies like that. I got a few thousand copies printed, some 10, 15 pages, some small, say what is the summary and summary of that book, and then circulated. And then, because there are so many writers, we can also bring some, say, abridged forms, or at least some of these summaries like this in local languages, and then circulate to so many people several, particularly the media people, because there is a lot of infiltration into the media by the left-wing people. Because left-wing people, they have got a strategy of what is called agitation and propaganda. They call it agit-prop. So they are experts in infiltrating into any field, and then we are not so conscious of this particular, say, thing. So we should also try to, say, step into those fields and try to, if not use the word infiltrate. Of course, we can use the word infiltrate. We can also, we have to make our presence in those fields. So this is another thing. And finally, I want to conclude that before I came to this conference, I was rather pessimistic, in the sense that, okay, there is such an avalanche which is falling on us, what can we do? But then, having seen some of the young scholars, I am going back with a very, very optimistic note. People like Murali and the youngsters who presented the papers this morning, and then even yesterday and day before, we saw several youngsters who made such beautiful presentation. I am now going back with a lot of optimism. In fact, I should confess that this is a session where elderly people learnt a lot from youngsters. I am honestly confessing. I was seriously taking down notes when all the youngsters made presentation, and then this is a session where all old people, they learnt from the youngsters. And Professor Kannan seems to have done some wonders, because he seems to have motivated so many of his students. So now, I am now supposed to propose the vote of thanks also. I am not sure as to who are all the people who are behind this particular thing in order to make it such a great success. It is such an enlightening session. And our first of all, we have to thank Sri Malhotra ji for having come over here. And then he and also his, the Indian counterpart, that is Infinity Foundation India, Vijaya Vishwanathan, and her team. So they deserve all congratulations, and then we have to thank them for such mighty contribution to in the preservation of our culture. Then I also thank, though I am also part of the IGNCA, we had a lot of discussion, as Sri Joshi ji was mentioning. There was some sort of dilemma, and then some sort of ideological dilemma, we can say. So some such discussion we were having about, he mentioned that thing. And then we decided we have to we have to go ahead with this, because this is very much needed. So I formally thank the IGNCA, and say Professor Kannanji. So he has, say, motivated so many young scholars, not only motivated, but I am sure he has trained, because he knows the methodology and all that. And we, in fact, when I wrote my first book, I never knew that I had to write I had to prepare the bibliography, prepare the index, glossary, etc., etc. So all those techniques are very much needed. So all those things he is training them in a very, very formal way. So we should thank him. And all the young scholars who have come here, I thank. And many other people, because the people who are behind this and people who have been supporting this, who have supported this, I am not personally aware of most of them. Okay, you need not feel bad that I am not mentioning them. You can think that I am not exposing your names. You can say that. I don't want to expose your names. So I thank all the people who are behind it and whom I do not know. So I thank all the, the staff of this IGNCA, the photography section, the video section, and all the people. And I thank you one and all. Thank you.